How's everybody doing tonight? Kind of out of sorts. You see it? We're going to talk about the AWS outage. Just kind of put that into GRC risk management terms. Let's see if anybody's in here. We're going to get started. Let's see, I'm getting my chat up. Give me one in the chat if you can hear me. Looks like it's just me tonight, but we're going to make it happen and just check us out on the replay. Let's see. Let's check on some. Shout out to Regine. Give me one in the chat if you can hear me. Give me one in the chat if you can hear me. Appreciate you. So we're going to talk about the big AWS outage. I'm sure everybody's seen it and heard it and figured out it was a DNS issue. So everybody know I'm a NIST guy. So a couple things we're going to talk about from a NIST and GRC perspective is contingency planning. Inside of contingency planning is disaster recovery and DR. So if one of the regions went out in AWS, theoretically, you should have failed over to another region and can be able to continue to operate. So it was kind of interesting. Some of the very large companies didn't seem to have a DR plan. So we're going to kind of dig into that. So the CP right there, continuous planning. I want to talk about what happened. And again, looked like some very large companies didn't have a DR exercise, DR plan, or they couldn't fail over to another region, which was super interesting. From $1 million companies couldn't seem to execute that. So we're going to talk about, once again, DR sites, especially in AWS, and different DR plans and pilot, active. There's a couple, 4 or 5 DR scenarios you can do in AWS. So it was kind of surprising that those bigger companies seem to be struggling in that area. Once again, shout out to Regine for giving me that one in the chat. Once again, if you got any tech questions or cybersecurity, drop them in the box. Shout out to my man, Jeffrey Johnson, for joining. Good evening. Once again, we're going to go over the AWS outage, the DNS outage that seemed like half the United States was out. So once again, we're going to talk about it, kind of do a post-mortem. Then the part of that, shout out to Dr. Ozier, what is the action items a GRC team should be doing since that outage was happening? One of them we're going to talk about is tabletop. You should be doing a tabletop with your tech team and your infrastructure team. If AWS DNS goes out, can you fail over to another region? Can you fail over to another provider? Right? So it's Route 53 is their DNS, but can you use Cloudflare? Check AWS, and if AWS down, roll over to Azure. Right? So depending on, once again, the classification and the criticality of your data. Once again, if you got any questions or cybersecurity or tech, just drop them in the chat. The other thing we're going to talk about is NIST. You should be doing an annual DR test. So it depends on what these companies would be testing. So part of your CP there, continuous planning. Continuously planning should be your DR. Your DR plan inside your DR plan, you should be DRing at least once annually, which is once a year. And I work with some clients that want us to test DR every 6 months. So once again, depending on the criticality and classification of your data, how should you be doing your DR test? So let's kind of figure out what happened to AWS, right? My favorite vendor, by the way. So if you read through, and we are going to read through some of the summary of it, they put it on their webpage, but it seemed like US East 1, specifically DNS and DynamoDB, went down. And AWS services stack on each other, meaning other services use DNS and DynamoDB. So if those other services are down, like EC2 uses that to log and spin up new instances, it couldn't do that, right? So it's called a control plane. So it controls a lot of stuff worldwide. So I think they need to work on that, right? So since that worldwide DNS and DynamoDB was down, that cascaded to other services. So here, this is the standard Route 53 is their DNS. So if their US East 1 was down, theoretically, see, that's the primary. You should be able to roll over to their standby. You see it over there. That's North Carolina, US West 1. So if your East is down and you have your DR set up correctly, you should be able to fail over to another region like US West 1. Shout out to my man Equalizer for joining us. So that was kind of dumbfounding me among bigger companies, because from a high level, it's easy to set this up, right? I've set this up in different labs. I think I've done a couple of videos on it. So once again, if your primary is down, it does a health check, it should roll over to your standby. Now, it could get more complicated if you got databases, you got read replicas, you got to spin them up in the other region, or you taking snapshots to make sure they're in sync, right? We're going to touch a little bit. But the basic part is Route 53 does a health check to US East 1. It's down, roll over to your standby, right? But once again, it was billion-dollar companies seem to be down. So I don't know if they don't have DR when testing their DR. The DR failed. So that was kind of interesting, especially with Starbucks. You would think rewards points, you could just fail over to another regions. That's not life or death. So I might actually dig down to Starbucks, because I know they're a billion-dollar company, but they didn't seem to have failover. So somebody should be getting fired. Shout out to PBO. We should be firing some people. We can't get our DR happening. So once again, right there is your standard failover. Primary down, health check, roll over to your standby. AWS sets it up where you can easily, with auto scaling groups and replicas and standby databases, it seems like you should be able to make that happen. But we know when you drill down, sometimes you have legacy technology where you don't have that type of failover. It's easy. So this was from, once again, the NIST 800. The 834 is the contingency planning. I looked at that doc. It was about 12 years old, but part of that was NIST disaster recovery plans are strategic plans for restoring IT systems and functions after a disruptive event. Focus on restoring systems to their pre-disaster state. This guidance, particularly in the 834, outlines a framework for contingency planning and includes identifying critical systems, performing impact analysis, developing response strategies, and implementing recovery procedures. The plan is part of a larger continuity strategy, typically involving 3 phases: activation, notification, recovery, and reconstitution. Part of that is a disaster recovery plan or plans, and you should have an annual test. So I'll just pull that out. I'm late, but was it infrastructure protocol error or personal error? Protocol error. Their DNS went down. We're going to dig into that coming up. Equalize, but now it was their DNS seem to go down from a infrastructure standpoint, infrastructure protocol. So they didn't say if it was a patch or if it just physically got overloaded. Once again, I got it coming up and split out, so we're going to definitely dig into that question a little more. That's part of the NIST versions. IR3, incident response, testing the effectiveness of incident response capability for a system annually using the test tabletop exercise. We're going to kind of go through a tabletop exercise, how we would test this at the end. Control enhancement 2 with related plans, coordinated incident response testing with organizational elements responsible for related plans. The supplemental guidance, these are some of the plans that are part of that DR. Incident response testing includes business continuity plans, contingency plans, disaster recovery plans, continuity of operations, crisis communications, occupant emergency. Now let's roll back. Now this is, people know I do federal work, right? So only big companies and big federal agencies are going to have this many plans. When I do it for small companies, usually I have a BCP, business continuity plan, and a disaster recovery plan. That's usually what I run for smaller companies. So I'm inside there, if they have offices, we might talk about crisis communication plan, which would include tornado plans, earthquake plans, right? But from a smaller company, usually we're going to have business continuity and disaster recovery. I just like to show this from a federal perspective because that's kind of what I want to, that's kind of where I live, and to big systems and big things. So once again, if you're a big company, you should have some of these plans. And part of that, once again, is the DR plan. And it seems like a lot of big companies got taken out by an AWS outage to one region. So let's start digging into what happened, right? October 2025. And two, when you're in a larger company and I'm interviewing a CISO, he was excellent at this. It should read like a police report of things that happened, right? And I pulled this actually out of AWS incident page, and I'm gonna be transparent. I put it in ChatGPT and told it to make it chronological and kind of summarize it for me. On October 2025, AWS reported increased error rate and latencies for multiple AWS services in the US East 1 region. So to me, when I saw that, I'm like, that's one region. So we should be able to fail over. AWS probably has another 40 regions. So how's one region taking out multiple billion-dollar companies? So that's what kind of caught my eyes to kind of kick it off. Shortly after that, AWS confirmed significant errors rates for requests were made to their DynamoDB endpoints, once again in the US East 1 region. So usually that's how it happens. Something goes down, it cascades into other services, and those services are dependent on other services, right? So that's kind of what you see when things like that happen. When I was at DoD, we had our own data center. When stuff happens, it just started cascading. Your disk fills up, your database goes down, your database affects your app server affects your web server, right? Things just start cascading. And that's kind of, once again, kind of what happens. And you got to just start digging into it, right? That's how the big dogs make the big money, right? So that's kind of what happens. Once again, put your questions in the chat. My bad. Grandkids are asking me to cash app them some money. Granddaddy and PBO sending the grandkids some money. Let's keep growing, right? The root cause was identified. You see it in red. The DNS resolution issues for the DynamoDB API under US East 1 regions. Because many services depend on DynamoDB, we were talking about the cascading, because this region is a central hub, aka control plane, the failure cascading in many other AWS services and downstream customer systems globally. So I'm kind of a little, AWS should have better microsegmentation and better decoupling, is what we call it from a program language. Your US 1 East region is causing global issues, right? That's an AWS issue. Your one region shouldn't be causing global mayhem across the planet. That's what my man said. I don't know about that, because really I believe this happened 3 years ago. I think it's something how they got their control plane designed that they need to once again decouple that. Because let's read it again. DNS resolutions for the DynamoDB API in US East 1, because many services depend on DynamoDB, and because this region is a central hub control plane, the failure cascaded to many other services and downstream customers globally. So my question to AWS is, why is this one region causing you global mayhem? And I think they touched upon that coming up. I think, to me, that's a fundamental design flaw in their control. That's easy for me to say. I'm not running $1 billion company, but to me, that doesn't seem quite right. The latent defects in the internal DNS automation for DynamoDB caused the system to assign and maintain corrupt, empty IP records for the DynamoDB endpoints in US East 1. With the DynamoDB endpoints unreachable and resolving incorrectly, many AWS services depending on it, directly or indirect, to begin erroring out or having latency. Right? Because we know DNS is like the phone book, right? So if you say www.pbo, it follows that to IP address, IPv4, IPv6, right, in those endpoints. So now it's saying those were corrupted, so it couldn't figure out what goes to what, right, for that particular region. The disruption was not due to an internal attack, but due to an internal automation race conditions in DNS planning and management. So to me, right, they're telling you, we did some automation, and the race condition means it was building them so fast it couldn't find each other, right? And it sounded like it was building them so fast it corrupted itself. So right there, the disruption was not due to an external attack. That's cool. Wasn't a nation attack, due to an internal automation race condition and DNS planning and management. So once again, but I guess my question to that, once again, that's one region. So how is you affecting the globe? But a lot of times DNS is an overarching service, because you use DNS to look up a name and an IP across your whole infrastructure, right? Usually you don't have that replicated out per region. That's actually a control plane. We call it a master service, meaning we're going to use that for all our other services. PBO goes to this IP address, and we just going to put that IP address to any services PBO is trying to use. We're not going to replicate that in each service. So I guess the question is, do we need to replicate that in each service, right? So let's keep going and seeing what else. But that was the main issue with that. But I do want to give a shout out to AWS. They are very transparent what's happened. They transparent of once again what happened, what we need to do to fix it, and a lot of times how they're going to fix it. So I do want to give them a shout out for that. Many major consumers and enterprise services, gaming, social media, payment apps suffered, even if they weren't hosted in the US East 1, because of dependencies on services tied to this region. The US East is one of the early regions, so a lot of their control plane stuff are in that region, right? And I call it a master region because all the other regions come to US once to look up DNS things, DynamoDB endpoints. So once again, that's why that region cascaded and affected the planet, right? For AWS customers, operations like launching new EC2s, IAM changes, DynamoDB global changes, and other features tied to US1 experience areas of delay. While the core failures within DynamoDB endpoints DNS, the cascading effects made with the outage larger in scope affected 100 plus AWS services per some reports. Once again, they're one of their control plane regions. And once again, that affects other services that use DNS, use DynamoDB, using DynamoDB global tables on what happened. Once again, put any questions in the chat. Let's keep going. You know how you do. You know how we do. If you got any questions, just drop them in the chat. The response to remediation. AWS disabled the faulty DNS automation for DynamoDB globally while they fixed the root issue. They added additional protections and safety checks around DNS, the planner of DNS, and the actor systems for DynamoDB. They communicated with customers via their post-event summary mechanisms and documented their incident. Once again, they did an excellent job on that. I actually start doing that for companies I work for. When there's an issue, what's the issue, when it resolves, what times it happens, and what are you going to do so it doesn't happen again, right? And that's the thing. And I'll put that video in the description. AWS kind of has a form and process they do for any time you have a system outage. And I think that's a great blueprint to do. Kind of show the maturity of your organization. Key lessons for users and architect. Even a failure in a single point endpoint, especially in the primary hub like US East 1, can ripple globally if many systems depend on it. DNS and control plane infrastructures are critical. System availability depends not only on data storage, compute, on how services are discovered and routed. And that's where the DNS is used, right? How do you discover a name and the IP? Once again, how do you route it to that IP? As an AWS customer, consider architecture that avoids single regional dependency for critical service, or use multiple region backup and failover. Monitor not just your application layer, but also dependencies, i.e. the DynamoDB endpoints and IAM. That's even from a federal space, and we're going to talk about that coming up, looking at the different failovers. I don't think we look at endpoints or IAMs as part of failure. I consider your management and your privilege. Once again, that's a control plane. I just assume that won't be affected, to be honest. So that's something I need to kind of think on in my DR perspective. And once again, we're going to talk about DR tabletops and especially from an actionable item from a GRC standpoint, what that should look like. Build resilience and retry back-off logic and failbox in the event of upstream service failures. And we talked about that when I worked for large clients. If we're getting data from a particular agency or service and they're sending us data and we're down, how do they know to resend it, right? So a lot of things we were putting stuff in queues. So if we're in maintenance mode and we're down, the data just go in the queue. Then when we come back up, we pull it off the queue. But then somebody asked the question is, what if we're down for 2 weeks? How much data can the queue hold? We're like, oh, we didn't think about that, right? So the theory is And we'll talk about that. RPO and RTO, return to operations, point in time of how much data you can lose, right? So then part of that is how big is your logs? All right. If they're down or you're down, right? So what does that look like between two agencies or between two companies? How this impacted Route 53 checks and failovers. You see it right there. Route 53 health checks, and we're going to look at that. We looked at that originally, was in that diagram. Originally executed DNS driven. They monitor your endpoints, application load balancers, EC2s, API gateways. Depending on your configuration, the DNS disruption could affect failovers in these ways. Right, so we were talking about your health checks was querying the endpoints. This check could time out or be false. You relying on DynamoDB for your app. Even if the Route 52 check stayed up, the health endpoint may return 500 because it was corrupted. Your failure target secondary region depends on your US 1 health checks control plane. The Route 53 control plane operation, like update health checks, may have been lagged slightly in the event of corruption or problem with the DNS. You have a health check hosted in multiple regions. Route 53 default behavior most likely to still work because the Route 53 runs checks from 15 global AWS regions not tied to US East 1 only. So at the bottom, the DNS outage inside US East 1 could break health checks. That depends on the regions, but not globally disable Route 53. So once again, why was all those Fortune 500 companies were down, right? Once again, do they not have DR? So I'm going to try to dig into Starbucks and see if, because they were down, and figure out if they have DR site. I mean, but let's be real. They were just talking about rewards. You wouldn't get your points for your coffee that morning, right? So that's it. Best practices for DNS failover. Use multiple region health checks. Use alias failover, not CNAMEs. Use cross-region dependency sparingly. Right? So those are some things you do. Once again, if US East was down and you were using, once again, multiple region health checks. Alias failover records, not CNAME. I usually use CNAMEs. So once again, I need to, from a GRC standpoint, put that down inside my tabletop exercise to see if the org is using CNAMEs. Use cross-region dependency sparingly. If your health check targets itself, calls DynamoDB or another region, so dependency like secret managers, use a static health check endpoint that does not depend on that region. So if you're looking for DynamoDB in one and it's not up, what are you going to do? Are you going to fail over to another region? Are you using global tables so it's automatically active? Right. But once again, those are some of the things that the cloud engineer, the development staff, and really the infrastructure team needs to talk about to figure out if your company's vulnerable to a DNS outage. And once again, that's the failover health check. So Route 53 is going to do a health check to US Region 1, probably looking at that web server to see if it's up. And if it's down, it's going to fail over once again to the standby region. Right, so that's what they were talking about with the CNAME check at the top in Route 53. They want you to use alias. Once again, if that health check fails, you should roll over to another region. And as a GRC actionable item, from a tabletop, those are the questions you should be asking your network team or your infrastructure team, depending on, how large your company is. And once again, these you see it at their primary region and the secondary region. If you see at the where it has the database symbol, primary database, replica, and replica. So when your primary goes down, that replica should be updated. and turn into your primary so you'll be automatically up and running. Shout out to R Square Prime for joining us. So those are some of the things, and we're not gonna get too crazy with it. So when you run your DR test annually, those are some of the things we're talking about. Once again, do you have health checks from your primary region to your secondary region? If you're running a primary and a replica, if this primary site goes down, your replica needs to be automatically changed to your primary, because replicas can only read data. You can't write data. So when your primary goes down, what's going to change, upgrade your read replica to a primary, right? Once again, that's your infrastructure team to figure out. You need to just ask the question, so if the DNS issue happens again, you can actually go to another region and be up to work. R Square is saying hi to Regine. Shout out to the team. So let's keep going. And from a database perspective, we were just talking about, how do you change if you see in A, that's your primary, then once again, your read replicas, but once your primary goes down, those read replicas need to change over to primary once again. So one of those needs to change so it could turn over to a read, right? But that has to be automatic, right? So when it does your primary check, if it's down, it rolls over to your secondary. Your read replica needs to be upgraded to your primary. And this right here has a low RPO. You probably only lose about 5 or 10 minutes worth of data, because once again, once it sees your health check from your primary goes down, it's going to automatically upgrade that to your, once again, primary. You should be read writing. It's part of your KPIs is how much data you can lose and how quickly you need to come up. We can come up quickly, but it's going to cost us more money. Shout out to Casual Economists, definitely one of the day ones. So those are some of the things when you're in AWS, you're talking about there's an AWS issue. How do you spin up from one region to another region, get your database to change over to primary, and once again, you back up and running with very little intervention, very little loss of data. So that's kind of what will surprise me when they show me that list of billion-dollar companies. It's like, you don't have a DR, site plan, execution test. So what is a tabletop? A tabletop is just us going through it on paper with the infrastructure team, so we can make sure if something happens, we have a plan in place. And our plan is kind of what we were looking at previously. Primary goes down, it spins up to standby. So if that was US East 1 that went down, that's the North Virginia, we should have been able to spin up in North Carolina in a heartbeat with very little interruption. Then at the bottom, right, see it has primary database, read replica. So if that primary site goes down, we need to spin up, it's called a Lambda, which is basically a program that changes our read replica into a primary. And we should be able to continue operations with a heartbeat. None of our customers should know this. We shouldn't have lost any money. They were talking about people were losing hundreds of millions of dollars because they were down for 10 hours, 12 hours, right? Why is that though? AWS has standard DR capabilities. And once again, the main piece of, if we have a large database with read replicas, how do we switch over to our new region, change it over to the primary so we can have rewrite and continue to operate? Once again, from a GRC perspective, we would be responsible for testing that and make sure the plan was there and doing an assessment to make sure the plan was there. Then a lot of times, and once a year, actually cut off the primary database to see if it'll fell open. Right? Usually what we do is around a holiday, usually around a Thanksgiving or Christmas, which sucks, we take 3 days and test that out. Right? We cut off the primary database. Usually there's a security group or firewall. We usually just have it block all the traffic so it can't get to that database. So it should fail over to another region, make that new read replica a master where it can rewrite, and it should be able to continue to operate. And usually we run maybe like 100 records in there, 100 test records. So we make sure it failed over and make sure the web server and everything failed over to the new region and it's working. A lot of times too, when you deal with customer clients, they want you to test it every year. And then once you get per NIST 53, you got to test your DR and your contingency plans annually. Let's talk a little bit about the tabletop. The purpose and objective of it: to validate the organization's ability to detect, analyze, and contain and recover. We made this specifically for AWS. AWS DNS failure affecting public or private name resolution. And the mapping to that will be NIST, detect and analysis, the DNS shot quickly. That's 861R2, detection and analysis. Failover production endpoints to a healthy region. Maintain internal resolutions for VPC workloads. That's virtual private cloud. That's basically just your subnets that you use to do that workload. Coordinate communication to executives and customers. 861R2. The big thing, especially in the feds and IRS, when you're down more than 24 hours a day, you got to let your federal oversight agency. I do a lot of IRS work. That could be health and hospital if you're doing high trust and HIPAA. If you're doing CGIS, that would be the FBI, right? So there's a lot of federal points. So if you're down more than 24 hours or 72, you got to start letting people know. Your clients, you probably have SLAs with your clients when they want to be known of issues. So that's kind of where this tabletop makes sure all those touch points are taken care of. We talked about that coordinate communications, capture evidence and lessons learned, post-incident activities. We call that postmortem. That's what I put in there. Kind of like it's a dead body. So let's talk about why this won't happen again and what do we have in place to ensure this won't happen again. So they want to see you have a lessons learned. Once again, AWS says what they're going to do. Now you got to say what you're going to do. Right, we got to have a DR site. We're going to test it annually. Instead of just testing the DNS, we're going to test the 3 levels: web server, application, subnet, and a database subnet to see if each one of those are down. All right, so that's some things from a agency or organization you would put in the test. Scopes and assumptions. In scope, public DNS, that's the Route 53. Health checks, failover routing, internal DNS, input and output, service dependencies, ALB, CloudFront. Because when we read it, right, it said those services down made another 100 services go down. So we got to make sure if those other services go down, right, the cascading effect, we can roll over different regions and hopefully get those services to work in the new region. Out of scope, this wasn't a data breach or forensic. This was all AWS and us internally. There was no outside attack or nation state. Assumption grounded with truth. Primary regions. We talked about that. US East 1 went down. So what's your secondary region? Production domain, Route 53 in public hosted area. VPCs use Route 53 resolvers without outbound endpoints to on-prem or DNS hybrid solutions. How do you health check TTLs? How do you check that your US East 1 region is not healthy? Right, time to live. Do you do that every 30 seconds? Do you do that every 5 minutes? Do you do that every 15 minutes? What is your check ratio to check your device? The more you check it, right, there's more network traffic, right? So there's a balance you want there. CloudFront and AAP endpoints support multi-region, a warm standby. Error budgets and SLOs defined, but not everyone knows them. So you got your objectives, your SLA agreements, right? Service level objectives, service level agreements. Because a lot of times when I work for companies, they have outside clients that they're billing or doing IRS work for. So if we're down for a certain amount of time, we got to give them money back, right? Because we charging them to use our AWS tenant. So part of your SLAs and objectives means if you don't meet them, now they're not giving us money, but you're giving them credit, right? So instead of if you're charging them $500,000 a year, if you're down every day, you might have to give them a 10% credit daily, right? So what are those objectives? The reason you need to know that tells you what customers you need to hit first, right? So you have high priority customers because they're going to have high priority credits. Once again, the participants' roles and responsibilities. So an incident commander leads response, decision, and timelines. So it's just not nation attacks. It's just not cybersecurity attacks. Some of those are internal issues that is an incident, right? It's not an incident as an attack. It's an incident as operation. So a lot of times we still run the same incidents because we still got the same reporting requirements. DNS and network SME, that's not PVO. I struggle in that area. So definitely we work with the infrastructure team, the networking team, a lot of times the cloud engineering team, because all those work together. API and SRE leads for the app help, security and IR leads, incident response lead, communication and PRs, stakeholders. Business owners are definitely in there. We talked about the cloud platform engineers, program managers and problem managers, recorders, note decisions and timestamps. So even though it's not an incident, you're still communicating with a lot of teams. And that's kind of, I think, where GRC teams shine, because you're usually going to be the communication point person for all of those. A lot of times it's you relaying that to the project management team. A lot of times we have a PMO office, a project manager. So they're actually kind of quarterbacking, but you have the communication points, the endpoints, and the security knowledge. So, but you have to report that up the chain. So that's kind of what I end up usually doing. Sucks to be PVO. Sucks to be me. Here, so I'm gonna put the link in there if you want to come up. If you have any questions, drop them in there. So, but once again, part of the success KPIs, we were talking about that inside the Discord. What's some of the KPIs and key indicators, key risk indicators? MTD, once again, the time less than 10 minutes. MTA, less than 15 minutes. MTR, traffic shifted to a healthy region or provider in under 30 minutes. Once again, that didn't happen for a large major companies. Unresolved DNS queries after mitigation windows. Accurate update within 20 minutes from the detection points. Complete evidence bundle. Your logs, right? What logs are you bundling up to make that happen, right? So that's kind of where that's from. And once again, that's part of your KPIs and KPRs. So when you come on staff looking for things you need to report up, those are some of the metrics people like to see. Well, I should have made that mean. MTD, what does that mean? I know I was abbreviation. Mean time to detect, what it means, the average time between an incident actually starts and when it's first detected or reported. Typical data sources, you got CloudWise, Security Hub. They got uptime websites for AWS. Targeted best practices, lower is better, aim for less than 10 minutes in a mature environment. MTA, mean time to acknowledgement, the average time between detection when someone acknowledges or begins to actively respond to your incident. PagerDuty, OpsGenie, and ticket stamps, less than 15 minutes for critical incidents. AWS, 1 should be less than 30 minutes. 2 should be less than 30 minutes. MTR, mean times to resolve and recovery, the average time between detection and full restoration of services or risk mitigated, sometimes split into repair versus recovery. Typical data source, incident tickets, postmortem, monitoring dashboard. Less than 60 minutes for high impact production issues, depending on the SLA and the ATO. ATO is the authority to operate. SLA is system level agreement. So in there, you usually have, like, say, you got to be up within 10 minutes. If you're down for 24 hours, I've seen you got to pay $10,000 a day. I've seen some weird stuff. So once again, that's negotiated in those particular agreements. Why that matters? MTD shows monitoring effectiveness. MTA shows alerting and on-call responsiveness, and MTR shows technical and process efficiency. Once again, those are your KPIs and KPRs, what you need to put on your dashboard, right? And what managers like to see rolling in the organization and how that will work. So let me shoot back here. Let me know if you have any additional questions. I kind of summarized that AWS event. Then my big thing was on this one, right? If your primary is down, which was US East 1, you need to be able to roll over to another region. That's the beauty of AWS. That's the beauty of having automation. And that's what they talked about. Some of the automation did too much automation and made a race event, and I guess corrupted some data files that caused the outage in the DynamoDB. Then people were looking for certain DynamoDB endpoints, and once again, it started to cascade and started to have those issues. But once again, billion-dollar companies didn't seem to have a DR plan. Once again, I don't know why I'm enamored with Starbucks. Their rewards for coffee couldn't come up. So you a billion-dollar company, Starbucks. Why you have DR for the for the coffee reward points? So I'll probably dig into that and see if I can figure out kind of what was going on in there. So you see it there. The latest defect in internal DNS automation for DynamoDB caused the system to assign and maintain incorrect empty IP records for the DynamoDB endpoint. Endpoints unreachable result incorrectly, meaning AWS service depend on it directly or indirectly, began airing out and having high latency. The disruption was not due to an internal attack, but due to an internal automation race condition in the DNS planning and management. So shout out to AWS for transparency of what happened and what they're going to do to fix it not happening. Two, once again, you should be able to fell over into another region. Once again, depending on what resources you're looking for, depending on what level you were at. Two is depending on the maturity of your company. So I'll hang out a little longer. If you have any additional questions, that's kind of my understanding. Once again, they have their you talked about their event summary page. It was pretty excellent. It was pretty convoluted, to be honest. I was struggling when I was going through it. Whoever wrote it, it wasn't super technical, but they had a lot of technical terms. They didn't kind of smooth it out the way I thought they should. But once again, shout out to AWS. They have 1 billion transaction, thousands of services, and they run 33% of the cloud. So that's a big, big number. So for me, people, I just thought it was normal business. When you do that much volume, that much complexity, I think the last time they were really down was 3 years ago. I thought that was pretty standard. They got up within a day. So for me, I just thought it was adequate. You as a company, once again, you're in charge of the classification of your data, the risk, and your risk mitigation. Once again, be showing it your primary and standby. If not, you could go to Cloudflare, and if AWS down, you can spin up in Azure and spin up a whole infrastructure over there. If your data warrants that level of classification, that level of emergency, that level of RTO, return to operation, right? If you can't be down longer than 30 minutes, you might want to go multi-cloud, right? But two, you need to be making multi-cloud money, right? That's part of that. So that's my 2 cents on it. Once again, I dropped the link if anybody want to come up. From the GRC perspective, we talked about the tabletop. And as an actionable item, I think GRC organizations that are in AWS needs to talk about if the DNS is down, how do we test that? How do we spin up to another region? And if not, how do we get ready to set that up? Number one, you should not be using C names. You should be using aliases. What was another key factor in there? And that C name DNS, I'm very weak at that. I'm not. I'm gonna put that out there. That's something I don't really do a lot of. I make my money inside a region. I make my money because I programmed for 15 years. I understand architecture is more of a program. But when you talk about networking architecture at a wide area network level, which this is, that that's kind of out of PBO's wheelhouse, right? So that's something I want to get better at, probably in 2026. That level of sophistication and understanding of a mature organization. But usually, when you're doing stuff like that, you usually a national, if not global, company. Is it being soon the failover did not work due to the companies? That's an excellent question, Jeffrey Johnson. I'm assuming they didn't have failover because the way AWS worded, they kind of worded it in there like if you have failover properly, you should be able to done it. But two is a lot of people use C names, and I think the C name with the corruption of the DNS table, I think that's what got a lot of companies. Let me see if I can find that C name. So once again, I am guessing at that. So I think people see their best practices. 53 runs health checks lovely, but you can also redundant alarm. B, use alias failover records, not C names. Ensuring your primary and secondary routing use failover routing with health checks tied to alias. Most people use C names. I'm guessing, Jeffrey, and once again, I'm high level. If they had failover cloud and they were doing C names, a lot of people use C names and not alias. So I think that's why a lot of people were struggling to get that failover. Once again, Jeffrey Johnson, I am guessing at that. But if you looked at all the companies were down, there was a lot of companies were down. Let me see if I can look that up real quick. So, but once again, Jeffrey, I'm guessing at that. Ooh, I don't know if I could share that. I just found this on the web real quick, Jeffrey. What sites were down? Which apps and web servers were affected by an outage? I'm sure this is a list. So Snapchat, Fitness Pal, Fortnite, Canva, Roblox, PlayStation Network, Xbox. Those are big companies. So once again, did they not have DR? So once again, Jeffrey, I want to be transparent. PBO's guessing on that. I might try to dig in a couple of those. I didn't see the Xbox. The Xbox network was down. Pokemon Go, EA Games, Disney Plus was down. Slack, Reddit, Amazon, Alexa. Amazon and had Microsoft 365. Are they running stuff on Amazon? Microsoft Teams. So I need to dig into that, see why they were down. I don't know if they were using some of the DNS services, but once again, did they not have a TR site where they're using once again the C name versus the alias in the DNS replication? That's just me guessing, to be honest, Jeffrey Johnson. I am guessing. I want to be transparent. Once again, here's the link if anybody wants to come up right above Mr. Johnson's question question he put in. So my question, y'all didn't have DR? Y'all didn't have DR properly? Y'all didn't test the DR? What's going on? $1 billion companies? That was one of my jobs when I was at a big state client. We would run a DR test annually, so I would actually have to assist in that. I'm gonna try to get the guy that was in charge of the DR test. Super organized, super detailed guy. He did a great job. So I'm gonna see if I can interview him on my channel, because I actually learned a lot from him. Because we were at the state of Indiana, I was consulting. He had to do multiple agencies and make sure they didn't step on each other. All right, and who data was more classified, and what order would you do it? So I thought that was an interesting feat when you're talking about large companies and large state agencies. Oh, I agree with that, Jeffrey. Some people got yelled at, like somebody said, somebody getting fired. Somebody getting fired. So, but once again, that's why you do that postmortem. That's why you do the tabletop exercise, so you can learn and get all your lessons learned. So, and two, you want to learn from other people's mistakes. So when it's your turn, you'll be ready. So now we're like, okay, we got to test the DNS. Are we using C names or alias, right? So those are things you learn and you implement them into your postmortem planning inside your run book. So now when you do a DR test, you maybe block a DNS inside of AWS and act like it's corrupted to see if it'll fell over to another DNS, right? So put in a faulty IP and see if it goes to another wrong IP and it errors, it'll fell over to the secondary region, right? So those are some of the things we would try to test inside of our tabletop, then test in real life, right? What would that look like? Once again, you're working with the network team and the infrastructure team. Your job is to bring it up. Their job is to implement that, right? GRC is not implementing anything, right? But we want to make sure that particular issue or incident has been covered, right? So if you have a DNS attack, all right, DNS attack, poison DNS. If you have a bytes, bits, and packet attack, what does that look like? So you should have different attack scenario. If you have a DDoS attack, what would that look like? Right. So inside your run book, you should test certain things. Right. Shout out, you go to MITRE, and MITRE has all the different types of attack from nation state. Some of those that are more prevalent in your industry, you should be testing for them. Like some of them is an incident, and some of them is an operational incident. Right. You have a cyber attack, then you have an operational attack. Sometimes the operational attack is caused by you. All right. I know a developer accidentally DDoSed an organization because he was testing something. So how do you handle an operational attack and a nation state attack, right? A DDoS attack. Then once again, somebody getting in your org and dropping malware. Those are all different type of incidents that you should have tests for. Now, you're not going to have tests for everything, but the more things you have tested for that are more prevalent in your industry, right? That should be things you're prepared for. A lot of times it was stuff like, oh, we tested this, and this is similar to that type of attack. So, here, let's get to. Once again, that's the primary and the failover. So that's really one thing we should be testing off the bat, especially from a DNS perspective. So I'm gonna hang out. I think that's kind of it for me. Once again, if anybody have any questions, just drop them in the chat. If anybody wants to come up, I'm here. If you want to ask specific questions online, or if you want to drop them in the chat, PBO's here for you. I can't believe 2025 is about over with. Getting them on down, about to hit in November. So once again, from a GRC perspective, a lot of times we run the DR test specifically if we're dealing with certain agencies. Once again, I'm an IRS guy, so the IRS has a certain way you run those tests. Once again, I did them from a cybersecurity perspective, malware, virus. I've done them for different agencies. Shout out to my man B2B. How you doing?
Hey PBO, how you doing?
Man, I'm doing all right. I can't complain. How are you doing?
Doing well, man. Hadn't come up here in a while. I was like, let me go ahead and join in. Let's see.
You always welcome. We was just talking about a little bit about failover
Yeah,
from
oh
the
my
DNS.
God, I'm dealing with this right now.
So yeah, the AWS got a lot of people, man. So um,
Yeah, man.
gotta
I
make
I was I'm learning more so about how you can increase the global failovers that you can add to your jobs, so that way
mhm.
they can move to different what they call data collectors. Like they say, if it fails, okay, let's go to one data collector. But one thing is that I had to bring down the value for the failover because it kept doing it infinitely on one data collector. So I needed to make it switch to a healthy one. So I thought that was pretty interesting, like learning about like failover and how you say the DNS outage.
Yeah, and if you look on the screen, what gets a lot of people is the database layer. So I got a primary in one, and when I fell over, I got to change my rereplica to primary. And depending on how big your database is, that could take a minute. So
Mm-hmm.
what does that? I think that was get a lot of people was the database piece of that fell over. Because two was like how much data can you lose? What's your RTO? What's your RPO? How long you got to bring it back up from an SLA perspective? And I think a lot of people struggle with that.
Yeah, man, it's gonna take. It takes a long time, especially if you're dealing with some large, long tables. Like because the amount of columns that you have just increase the complexity.
Yeah, a lot of times though is you could do DynamoDB where they tables automatically sync, but you got to pay for that, man, because you're moving a
Hmm.
lot of data and it's automatically sync. You can do it, but do you want to pay for it? So
Yeah,
um,
yeah, because in DynamoDB is a NoSQL database, right?
it is. You could do it with Aurora. They got an Aurora Global, but
Yeah.
it's not read right on both regions.
Hmm.
So when the one region goes down, it syncs. So you got once again you got to change it over to primary sort of read right. But it's pretty quick, but I think it's expensive.
Mm.
So let's see if I can get a. Did I have a picture of that? Yeah, here it is. I think I got my next slide. And if you saw it. So yeah, if it's on the screen, so you got the master that's rewriting to the other Aurora replicas. These are relational databases. It could be MySQL or Postgres.
Hmm.
So it's automatically seeking into the replica. So when the primary goes down, it automatically make one of those read replicas primary. But I heard that is pricey. I heard it's pricey, but it can do. So if you got 5 petabytes on one database, you're gonna have 5 petabytes in your replica, and you got to pay for it. So
Hmm. Yeah, man, it sounds pricey. I mean, especially if
yeah,
you're dealing with like billions of rows.
that's it, right? So, but the question to that is, what's the classification? So, like you said, I know you're a data engineer, and so
Hmm.
does your warehouse need to come up at the same frequency as your operational tables? A lot of times, people do that for AI, machine learning, and reporting. You like, oh, that'll come back up when we get to it, right? It's not super critical unless you're a financial organization and you're using it to make investments on it. So
Hmm.
so that's the question: is what data do you need to come up and at what time?
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, I remember hearing this story. We had a presentation from a financial company, and they were talking about how like they can't use AI in a lot of instances because
Facts.
you just can't have mistakes.
100%.
Like,
The other part of that I help companies with is most companies don't do a business impact analysis, meaning
mhm.
we're gonna go to each department and say, how do you rank your data? Then what we do is we get the C-suite into a big room and say, this is their top 10 from each department. What order do you want to do this in? And people were getting their feelings hurt. They thought they were more important than they really were. And they were like, nah, we're not bringing that back up.
Mhm.
So it's like, okay, what do you want to bring? Usually, though, they say these are our core things. Like I did a tax thing. So anything with taxes, reporting taxes and refunds, that was number one. So if it wasn't included in any of that, you weren't coming up in DR. You were just going to have to wait till it came back up.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of companies don't go through and do a business impact analysis. So when stuff go down, people are guessing. This is important. This is important. So every year we would say these are the top 10 things we want to look at. These are the things we can afford to do, and these things you're just not important. You're not coming back up, right? So people were like, "Oh," so so people were getting their feelings hurt. I was like, "Oh, I thought that guy was important. Not really. Not really, right?"
Mhm.
So
Well, I ain't gonna say that. I would say everybody's important, but
no, I'm hurting feelings. You are not important. So if you're not on this top 10 list, sit down. Sit down, son. You're not important. You just
you
got
know,
subbed. Go ahead.
you know what, PBO? I remember I was in an interview like last year, and one of the guys, I told him how important data engineers were. Right? I have a little bit of bias because I'm a data engineer myself, and I was like, when I told him about it, he asked me about like a challenge I had, and and I told him that I remember one time the data just wasn't there, and then the whole website crashed. And he was like, "Yeah, the website, the data pipelines are important, but then also the networking teams are also important." So he's kind of like one of those eternal debates to see who's more important when we all kind of come together.
Yeah, but I like it, man. For me, the C-suite should rank them, and people, because I was hurt. People, I was like, he's like cybersecurity. You're not coming. I'm like, what? He goes, we're secure. If it's not, it's too late now. I was like, okay. So I
That's a
think,
good point, though. That's a
yeah,
good point.
yeah. I was like, when it made sense when he said it. Oh, let's get. It's like, no, man, we're down. Our thing is to get taxes out, get our systems up, and we collect bills for the whole state. The security is what it is. If we get, it's too late now. So I was like, oh wow. I was like, he's like, no, you're important, but you're not gonna be important because the only thing is critical is um, things that are for the constituents. Like I did tax returns, tax refunds, and people don't realize Department of Revenues for the state. We're the bill collectors. If you didn't pay your
It,
college, if you didn't pay your college tuition, no tax refund for you. You owed a ticket. We taking your tax refund. So I was surprised. Like, oh, okay. So those are the things were most important to the C-suite.
yeah, actually, I'm just thinking about it. Isn't the constituent supposed to mean like you're on somebody's behalf, like on the
Yeah,
company's behalf? Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
but since I work for a state, the constituents is the taxpayers. Because
Okay.
since I worked for a state agency, the constituents are the taxpayers for because we work at the behest of the governor, really. So when we
Hmm.
take tax revenue, we take them inside and we fund that money. We use that money. It's not Department of Revenues. It's used to pay the firefighters, National Reserve. So we fund the whole state. So we work at the behest of the governor. So we get
Hmm.
money and we basically give it to really state board of accounts, and they pay the state bills with it. It wasn't our money, but we do it at the behest of the constituents, the taxpayers of the state of
Hmm.
Indiana. So I just the governor used to say it so much to drill out in our heads. So that's why I say it like that.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Like, the representatives of the taxpayers.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
that's what we do. So yeah, so for him, especially as a governor, that's how he gets reelected too. So so
Hmm.
those were his high priority things he wanted us to do. So long story
Yeah.
short, when we do our business impact, he took that thing to the governor. It's called State Board of Accounts. The big agency reports to that, and they report to the governor. But he says these are the things he wants our agencies to do. These are his top priorities, so he got to get them, And part of that was the constituents to make them happy because people hate their taxes getting taken. So you want to do other things to make sure that money was spent appropriately. So,
man, them taxes have been hidden, boy.
all facts. The more money you make, the more money they collect.
Yeah. Two things about that. So first thing is more so about the cybersecurity side. I remember I watched a town hall, and one of the presidents of the company, he was talking about we need to stop worrying. Essentially, in so many words, I can't remember the exact quote, but he said we need to stop worrying about the cybersecurity.
Oh, hopefully B2B comes back. I didn't drop him. I'm sure B2B comes back. So once again, if you have any questions, shout out to Equalizer. The network team's pretty high on there because, but once again, I think it's one of those things. Once it's set up, it's gonna run. But no, they're definitely on deck. Because if the network's not right, nobody's getting any information. I think that's one of those. I call them infrastructure thing. You just assume it's gonna work, which is not actually show. Especially in this, they actually have a big DNS issue when it comes through the networking team. Oh, there he is. Welcome back. Welcome back.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, welcome back.
Yeah, for some reason it just said the connection went out. I don't know what last thing you heard.
You was just getting started. You was just getting started. You said somebody said don't worry about cybersecurity, and then you dropped.
Yeah, I guess that was them telling me to be quiet. But no, I was watching. I was watching online. I was watching a town hall, and the guy said one of the presidents of the company had said, "Stop worrying about the cybersecurity and worry about more so the making new technologies, AI, and also like building revenue." And I thought to myself, like, man, is that like how they like their goal? You know what I mean? Like, is it that they say like, "Oh yeah, don't worry about this. Worry about this." I guess more so from the president's standpoint.
Yeah, because from a president, he's thinking new business and new income. But if you get hacked, you're gonna be the first one crying, right? But yeah.
Yeah.
So that's it. I think people think security is gonna take care of itself. A lot of people think it's pre-built in now, which is not correct.
Oh, guess who I met, PVO?
Who you met? Who you meet?
So I I did a speech in Seattle, Washington for the Airflow Summit last month. And the company that flew me out there, their name is Astronomers. The astronomer company that they had into that whole scandal with the Coldplay concert.
Yeah. I just thought of that when you said that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I met the senior vice president of the company. I didn't know what his title was. Turns out he was senior vice president. I was like, oh, okay. And I would say like his conversation was very like elevated. Like there was a reason why he said specific things. And essentially he was just telling me about like all the risk that happened because of the Coldplay concert, because it gave them so much visibility. So it's like, oh yeah, people know your name now. They gonna expect you as like a target.
Reputational risk, man, is huge in that. I thought, yeah. It's weird though.
That's what it's called, reputational risk.
Yeah, because now their name is out there and it's done in a bad light. So now people look at your company in a bad light because two people were doing what they're supposed to do. That has nothing to do with your product, your development, your security, but people think of it as a bad light, like you're a bad company. You're like, dude, we had 2 people that was doing stuff that we fired both of them. So, but no, I put that under reputational risk because it didn't have anything to do with a product. It didn't have anything to do with one of your services. It was just 2 people doing something they shouldn't be doing. But that's the reputation of your company. And now people think of it as a negative light. So they think negatively of your product. So yeah, that's why I put that under kind of reputational risk.
Okay. Yeah, man, but it was cool. It's cool to like meet new people and stuff. You never know who you're gonna meet.
No, it's cool. Congratulations. I saw that because you were at the Apache Airflow. Because
Yes,
that kind of
sir.
made me think from an AWS. I usually do step functions to orchestrate my
Yep.
data engine. Yeah,
Exactly.
instead of Apache Airflow is usually more open source if you're doing other products beside AWS. But yeah, I usually use step functions to orchestrate my stuff. But no, I saw you out there. I think I gave you a thumbs up on LinkedIn.
I
No,
appreciate
no
that.
problem.
Appreciate
No,
that,
yeah, I
sir.
was thinking. I was like, yeah, in AWS that would be a step function.
Yep, because I use step functions now.
Okay.
And then I've used Airflow for like many years for like orchestration
Mm-hmm.
and batch ingestion. It's really cool. It has a whole bunch of different features. They're building out new things. I know from like a database side, like I was really heavy into Apache Airflow, but I was using it for Google Cloud platform.
Okay. Okay.
So I was using Cloud Composer, which I mean, it's probably changed now. It's been a few years since I've used Cloud Composer,
Okay.
but it has so many limitations that Astronomer actually like helps out with or covers.
Okay. Okay. Like I said, I'm just using that AWS world, so I usually just stay in that state function. But when I saw you out there and I was um, doing some labbing and they were talking about Apache Airflow, I'm like, nah, I'm just gonna use step functions. I'm staying in the AWS one. There's very few things that I run have dependencies inside data engineering very often. So I try to run mine parallel. So that's why I don't really use a lot of step functions. Once again, I don't have a lot of dependencies. Now, Equalizer, you correct. Senior executives in public companies are public knowledge. I'll pass. Um, yeah, that is kind of weird, but you make that public company money, so it's a double-edged sword. My thing is, what are you doing at a public concert, right? Doing that, right? I don't know. PBO don't approve of that, but at least be smarter, right? If you're gonna do that, so that's kind of my 2 cents on that. Equalizer. They'll do it, but if you're gonna do it, be a little smarter at it. So um, that's my 2 cents. So shout out my man B2B. I don't know if you had attended something else. He came and dropped out, but definitely go check out his channel. Definitely one of the day ones doing his thing in there, getting into data engineering. PBL has been putting his toe into data engineering a little bit, especially on the AWS side. So um, I did big data for 10 years at DoD, so just kind of seeing what AWS has to offer into that. And 2, from a GRC perspective, how would you handle compliance into that? Once again, if y'all had any questions, just drop them in the chat. I'm sure B2B is going to let me interview him in 2026. I'm getting my interview list. A lot of people love my interviews, but B2B's one reason I don't interview very much anymore. He had 2 very impressive Microsoft executive interviews, and I didn't think he got the appropriate views for that level of interviewing. So that's kind of one reason I didn't interview. Shout out to my man Larry. I wouldn't know about. I don't know about that. Shout out to Larry. I'm all right in AWS, getting a little better. It's all good. I don't know what's going on. I need to check out my new. Ever since I upgraded to this new Restream, I'm not gonna say I have problems, but it ain't as smooth as it used to be. So I gotta figure out if that's me or you before the billions. It might be me. I gotta check on and see what's going on. They're doing a few things different in Restream, so I gotta make sure I have it configured properly. But I thought my other guy came up the other week, and he seemed to stay on pretty good. But yeah, I appreciate you before the billions. I'm definitely going to interview you in 2026. Definitely one of the top data engineers on the YouTube. Once again, helping PBO get back into the game on that. Once again, I'm an AWS guy, so I kind of stay in the AWS realm of big data. Let's see. It is interesting. I've done that a couple of times. The cool thing is the C-suite makes that decision, right? So it comes on with classification of data. It comes around when we talk about because when I work for the state, we have federal regulations, we have state regulations, we have city regulations. Then we have the governor's true story, the governor's top 10 he wants you to do. So it's in there to say, you know, and two is we don't really do it by people and teams, but it turns out that what we usually do is by business function. So in the state Department of Revenue, we have a tax system. So the tax system is the number one business function, business impact analysis. So what systems support that function, right? The C-suite doesn't care about an Oracle database. They don't care about web server, app server. But when you say the tax system, that could be an Oracle database, that could be Apache, that could be Tomcat. So those systems support that number one business function. Then the number two business function was return taxes, because if you don't return somebody's tax return within 3 days, they earn interest on that, right? So that was number two. So what systems help us refund tax systems, right? And we got an FTP service. We sending stuff to the bank. We sending stuff electronically, right? Then the other part of that is if people owe bills like for tickets, moving violations, you didn't pay your educational bill for certain universities. Once again, we take your tax return. So we don't want to miss those because we don't want to send you your tax return back and you owe us money, right? So I think that was 3 or 4. So what systems and teams support those 3 business functions? And that's how you rank them, right? So once again, when you deal with the C-suite and top executives, they really don't care about technology, they care about business functions and what support that, right? If you say the Oracle database down, okay, what does that mean? The Oracle database facilitates tax revenue. Oh, that's very important, right? So I always talk in business function, and this system facilitates this business function, and this business function is ranked in your top 10. So I might do a video on that equalizer. It wasn't the Fed. They had a checklist when you do business impact analysis. It was interesting. So what we did is we didn't do this super complicated number stuff. We just said each department, what's your top 10 business functions as you as a department, right? You ranked them. And we took those top 10, put them all in the C-suite, and the C-suite ranked them. So yeah. Let me know. Yeah, if I don't make sense, let me know. But yeah, so once again, I've been doing this forever. I'm a technology guy, so I like to talk technology. But I figured out when I talk technology, people were just glazing over in the seconds because they don't really care. If you're a financial company, your number one thing is profits from investing in stock, and these are the systems that support it. That's what they care about, right? This business function. Then the other thing is, a lot of times they said at a high level, how do you break it down so in its subcomponents, right? So you can get granular but not too granular, right? If you have a tax system, that's huge. Okay, is it refunds? Is it collecting? Is it scanning paper refunds? Is it all electronic? So which pieces of there do you want to separate and pull out? Because a lot of times when you separate it into those 4 systems, that could be 4 different databases, 4 different technologies that could be done by different development teams or different products you bought, right? So getting to that level of detail, then once again, because most of these things are owned by business owners, not tech people, because the business owners got to pay for it. So that's kind of where I got used to it, talking into a more business language and not a tech language. The higher I go up in the corporation, the less I talk about technology. Right? We talk about business functions, P&L. Once again, the governor's top 10, right? So that's once again, that was the conversation. And two is, if you really don't do a BIA, business impact analysis, you really don't know what's important to the business, right? You're doing systems, but you're not adding value to the business. You probably are, but it's incidental. But when you can say this business function is number one, and these systems contribute to the number one business function, then you know where, from a cybersecurity, where to put your money, from a tech place, where to put your money, and from a DR, what things do you need to bring up first. So I think as you get more mature, that's definitely how you walk through that. But a lot of times when you first start, we need these systems up, right? So, but as you get mature, once again, what systems, what ranks, once again, from a Fred, state, county, city, governor, business perspective, right? And that's a lot of times where you say technology is not understanding what the business needs or want. That helps you understand what the business needs and wants. So that's kind of how that goes together. Shout out to my man. Let's see. I think that's all I had. Shout out to my man B2B. I got to figure out why I'm kicking him out. We definitely want him to come up and stay later. I got to see what's going on with my setup. See if that's me or you. I'm definitely going to get him in here and talk about data engineering and overlay that with cybersecurity. Because a lot of times too is you're moving a lot of data. A lot of times you don't know what data is inside. A lot of that, they call it a data swamp, because you just pulling data files from all over the company and you haven't really went through them and classified them, marked them. Sometimes you need to masquerade them. Sometimes you need to store them out. So from a GRC perspective inside of your cybersecurity, you need to understand what data is in your data lake. And data governance, who can get to it, who can see it. If it's employee salary, HR can see it. If you move that to another department, they shouldn't be able to see the salary because they don't have the IAM responsibility groups and privileges to see that data. But a lot of times when you put in a data lake, aka data swamp, because you got too much data in there and no governance. So how do you do that, and what does that look like in the future? Once again, just wrapping up the AWS DNS outage, what it was about, and from a GRC perspective and action item perspective, do we have a DR plan if that happens again? Right? Do we have a test plan to show that if we shut off our DNS or put the wrong IP address, would it fail over to another? You see their availability zone inside AWS and what that looked like and how would you test it. So once again, I am done for tonight. PBO is on fumes. Once again, I want to appreciate everybody for joining me. Shout out to my man Before the Billions. Shout out to the Equalizers. Shout out to Larry. Shout out to Before the Billions. Shout out to Casual Economists. Shout out to Jeffrey Johnson. Shout out to Regine. Shout out to R Square Prime, Rhonda, for joining me. I think that's it. If I missed anybody, you didn't put your name in the chat, please subscribe and hit that bell. Let's see what my man there. We have a devolution matrix. Okay. Identify our business critical system, off, etc. Keep those situations. No, you doing it? Shout out to my man. So you ahead of the game. No, that's it. A proper, like you said, you have a BIA, business impact analysis, and part of that, like you said, is business critical systems, like you said, offices, and part of that is COOP. If your office building goes down, do you have another office building? Are you letting people work remotely from home? So once again, how is that identified? Shout out to security expert for joining. I appreciate that. Larry, does the state have something like that? Yeah. Oh, yeah, 100%. We had, if you look inside, if you do NIST contingency plan, they have a BIA matrix inside that special publication. So usually we go out from there. So now definitely that's part of the artifacts you got to have if you're doing a federal system is that BIA. And that's one thing I'm trying to do is kind of figure out what is your documentation package for NIST. BIA, COOP. I did one earlier. Here's real quick before I shut down. I listed one that listed all of them. Yeah, I think it was. Oh yeah. So if you look here, Larry, from NIST, it's got the supplemental guidance plans you need. If you do an incident response testing test, a lot of people think incident response is a nation attack. Incident response could be an operational incident. So these are the plans the feds want you to have: business continuity plan, contingency plan. This is what we were talking about today. The disaster recovery plan, continuing operation plans, crisis communication plan, occupant emergency plan, critical infrastructure plan. Agencies should coordinate with IT personnel when applicable, data center and vendor personnel for confidentiality, FTI. That's coming out of the IRS. FTI is federal tax information, but that's IRS is a standard tax federal division. So this is going to be the same in most federal buildings. But once again, unless I'm doing fair work, that's a lot of plans. Usually I kind of consolidate into 3. But once again, those are all the plans they want you to have in your ATO package authority to operate. So when people come and do a third-party assessment, but yeah, shout out Larry. Yeah, those are similar. So those are the big doc plans. I very rarely did all of those, to be honest. Even when I was at the state, I think when I was at DOD, we did all those plans. I wasn't responsible for them at DOD, but yeah. So those are all the plans. So when I go to organizations, they bring me in. So those are the things I scope out, saying these are the things we need, and these are the things we need to do. Once again, from a GRC perspective. So once again, I hang out. Yeah, facts. Keeps you employed, man. Keeps you employed. Shout out to the couple thousand pages of paperwork. So once again, I want to appreciate everybody for joining me. I'm out. Come check me out Friday at noon. I'm trying to figure out what I was going to do. I was going to do Walmart security, physical security. So I'm debating if that's what I'm going to do or not. But once again, I appreciate everybody for joining me. PBO is probably going to lay down. He is tired lately. I appreciate everybody for joining. Shout out to Larry. We always on that overkill. That's how federal work keeps you employed. I'm out have a good night. Everybody have a happy hump day tomorrow.